this ability to transfer every year. I don't think it's great for young people. People ask me all the time, have the kids changed? I said, no, the kids really haven't changed. They still want to be held accountable. They still want discipline. But I tell you who's changed, and that's the parents. You know, when people look at me and my social media, they don't, why are you always talking about Israel? Why are you always talking about being Jewish? This is not about politics. It's about survival.
And we're back for another episode of Standpoint, and today we've got something super special and a little bit different. Usually we speak to politicians, elected officials, senators, members of Congress, ambassadors. Today we are speaking to my friend, Auburn basketball head coach, Bruce Pearl, the winningest coach in Auburn basketball history and really a transformative figure in college hoops. I couldn't be more excited to have him here, fresh off of a historic 2024-25 season that saw the Auburn Tigers notch a school record 32 wins, and they captured an SEC regular season title. They advanced to the Final Four, lost to Florida on a tough game, but Coach Pearl had a spectacular season. His team had a spectacular season. He was honored, though, as Coach of the Year for the SEC, for the Associated Press, and more. But his impact goes well beyond the basketball court. As the founder of the Jewish Coaches Association and other organizations that we'll speak about today, he's a vocal advocate for Israel and against the rising tide of anti-Semitism. You've seen him in press conferences talk about hostages that we're advocating for, stepping up against anti-Semitism, speaking about the Jewish holiday of Purim and what we can learn from it in the fight against anti-Semitism. He doesn't stop. He brings his teams and others to Israel to visit. He's a coach. Remember, it's not Yeshiva University. It's not a Jewish school. It's not Brandeis. It's Auburn in Alabama. It's an evangelical school. His players are mostly African-American. It's not obvious that he would do this. I actually got to meet Coach Pearl a few years ago in Israel, in Jerusalem. We had breakfast. He was there with his team. They were playing the Israeli national team. We stayed in touch. He's really just a fantastic person. Today, we will dive into his advocacy work, what it means to be one of the most pro-Israel coaches in the country, navigate the evolving landscape of the whole name, image, and likeness story in college sports, NIL, where players can monetize their name, image, and likeness. They can share in the revenues that schools are making in the selling their shirts, their jerseys, putting their names and faces or their likeness at least in video games. Is it good or is it bad? We'll reflect on Auburn's remarkable season. He's got big changes for this upcoming season. We'll talk about what he expects for this coming season. And, you know, we'll dive in. We've got lots of issues, talk a little bit about politics, a little bit about Israel, and lots about basketball. This is Standpoint, and I'm Gabe Groisman. And before we get started, I'd like to recognize our sponsor, Christians United for Israel, CUFI. You know, there's so much going on in the Middle East. It seems to be at the center of everything that's happening in the world, or at least most of it. This past week, we have President Trump traveling around the Middle East, making huge changes, making big impacts, whether it's with Saudi Arabia, even with Syria, with Qatar, with Israel. It's complex and it's critical. And what happens in the Middle East impacts us here. And at the center of the Middle East is the United States' greatest ally, Israel. Christians United for Israel is actually America's largest pro-Israel organization, and they are leading the charge to keep America on the right side of history. This summer, in just a few weeks, actually, you can join me as I join thousands of pro-Israel Americans, Christians, and Jews alike at the 20th Annual CUFI Washington Summit, June 29th through July 1st in Washington, D.C. I was there last year. It's a fantastic, fantastic summit. I'll be there again this year interviewing people before they go on stage, participating on some of the panels. You'll get to learn from leading policymakers, lawmakers, Middle East experts, and you'll even have the chance to make your voices heard on Capitol Hill. So do not be a bystander and register now for the 20th Annual CUFI Washington Summit at cufi.org, cufi.org. The registration is right there on their homepage. And be sure to use the Standpoint promo code. That's Standpoint25, Standpoint25, to be part of it all and to represent Standpoint. You'll get a discount as well. Hope you enjoy the show. Coach Bruce Pearl, thanks so much for joining me today.
It's great to be with you, Gabe.
For those watching, I have what we like to call a shit-eating grin on my face. I'm so excited to have the coach on with us. Coach, we got to meet about 3 years ago in a hotel in Jerusalem. I just texted you that picture. I was looking at it before today. You had brought your team over to play some national, I think it was the under-20 team from Israel. I went that night to watch the game, which was incredible. And ever since then, we've been in touch. Watching you this year in particular, not just after October 7th with the explosion of anti-Semitism, but then you moving forward with your success with your basketball team, and then always wearing who you are and what you stand for on your sleeve. I'm just so excited to have you on. So thanks so much for being here.
Well, Grabe, it's great to be with you, and I do remember us meeting over in Israel when we took our Auburn team over there to play with athletes for Israel, and getting a chance to play Danny Avila and the Israeli national team. We actually led at halftime, but then they had a change in the officiating crew in the second half. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were refereeing the game. I was getting absolutely no calls, and Danny Avila put up 24 in the second half, and they beat us pretty good. But it was a great experience. Great experience.
Listen, this is a political podcast, and most of my listeners and I am conservative. So what we've learned is that you have to take the game away from the refs, right? Just like in elections, too big to rig, right? You got to keep it. So you could blame the refs all you want. You did win against the younger teams, right? So I think that was impressive nonetheless. But listen, you have arguably been the most pro-Israel basketball coach or even sports coach at this level or at any level. Even from a couple years ago, I remember a speech you gave about Purim and the story of Purim and the story of resilience of the Jewish people. And then ever since October 7th with the hostages, you just haven't stopped. What's that like, and what does that sort of position mean to you?
Well, Gabe, you know what it's like because it's what you do all the time. I guess it sort of starts with the fact that I had a great foundation. My grandparents were Orthodox, and I grew up, with English sort of being a second language in my grandparents' house, and they kept kosher. But my grandfather was a plumber. He wasn't an educated man. But when he put on the tefillin in the morning with the other educated men at the temple, he was respected because he was a man of God, and it didn't matter what his means were, or whether or not he came to temple in his work clothes. It sent a lot to me growing up, that it didn't matter how much you had, as long as you wanted to pray to the Lord, you were welcome in His house. And then my Hebrew name's Mordechai, and my papa taught me that the reason why he named me Mordechai was because he didn't want me to be silent, especially about Israel and about anti-Semitism. And he came over to this country in 1929 at 11 years old. He escaped Ternopil. His parents sent him on a boat with his 3 younger siblings. Not all the family could get here, and many perished in the Holocaust and other things like that. But Papa always told me that if Israel had been born sooner than 1948, maybe more of his family could have survived because they could have afforded the trip to Israel. So then you put that stuff all together, and it just sort of has made me an advocate. I love this country, the United States of America, the greatest country in the world. I'm a Jewish basketball coach in Auburn, Alabama. Don't tell me this isn't a great country and there's not opportunity for everybody. There are obstacles, but not roadblocks. And at the same time, I'm very proud of my Jewish heritage, my faith, and the Jewish people. I'm very proud of the state of Israel and happy to be able to support her.
Yeah, listen, I'm putting myself in your shoes. I know college basketball is a very competitive endeavor. Everything from recruiting to transfers, we'll get into some of that, to losing players to the NBA. Players are looking for the whole package, where they're trying to go, especially the top players, where they want to go, where they want to stay. Have your positions that you've taken, the public positions that you've taken on politics, on Israel, on the Jewish people, hurt you at all in the recruiting space?
It has some, Gabe. It has some. And that's okay. Because look, we've all got a decision whether we want to wear a kippah or whether we want to wear, any kind of a symbol that says who we are and where we come from. It may not be good for business. It may not be good for popularity. And we've all got to make a decision about how outwardly we want to wear our faith. Now, I don't criticize people that don't do it. Look, my daughter Leah has actually, for some reason, when she was younger, she broke all the laws and she got a tattoo with some Hebrew letters down her back. And
by the way, to interrupt, it's a funny thing in the Jewish world when people get their first tattoo. It's always with Jewish letters, because you're not supposed to get tattoos, for those who don't know, according to the Old Testament, the Torah. We actually just read that last week. It was one of the commandments in last week's portion. So lots of Jewish kids, when they get tattoos, their first one has Hebrew because they think like maybe their parents won't be so mad at them.
Well, I don't have one right now, but I swear to God, I've been wanting to get one for a long, long time because I want to put some Hebrew letters on this body. But I wouldn't let her go. She had an opportunity to go overseas and go into a country that wouldn't have been safe if she could have exposed her Hebrew letters. And so she couldn't travel on a mission trip. Wouldn't let her go because it wasn't safe. So you look, that's the kind of stuff that takes place. And yet at the same time, it gives me an opportunity to be a Jewish basketball coach and affect so many student athletes. And about 85% of my players are African American. The African American community, the Jewish community, back in the 50s and 60s and 70s had a very close relationship. We were all living in the neighborhood. We were all living in ghettos. We were all being sort of discriminated against, and we had a connection. That connection over a period of time has dwindled. And, I love to reconnect people as a basketball coach. My job is to try to bring people together. So whether it be white or black, whether it be Christian or Jew, whether it be Abraham being the father of all nations, I'm always trying to find ways to connect, to respect each other's differences, but connect each other in so many ways because we all have so much more alike than we do apart.
Yeah, I can tell you, I spent a bunch of time yesterday looking at your old interviews and statements that you've made to prepare for this, to make sure, out of respect for you, I give you a good interview, and I learn a lot about you, and I follow you anyways, and you're a friend, so I follow what you're doing anyways. But one thing I came across was a post game interview with one of your players, Dylan Cardwell. They asked him, how important is faith to him as a Christian, and the question, I think, was loaded a little bit with you by his side, doing all the stuff you're doing for the Jewish community and advocacy in that space. And he answered, I'm just paraphrasing, he's saying, we both pray to the same God, like immediately. So when you're talking about connecting people, right, how important that was. I also saw an interview with another player that you recruited recently on a transfer. And he talked about how you're an authentic person and that's someone he wants to work with. So I think from my perspective, and it's also my experience, that even if people disagree with you, if you're standing up for something you believe in and that's truly you, right, it's authentic to you, they'll at least respect you for that. And I think a lot of these players are looking for that in a coach.
Big Abe, I always tell our players, we want them to play a certain way, but we want them to be themselves. That way they don't have to fake it. They don't have to act any particular way. We're, again, along the lines of us being somewhat different. What Dylan Cardwell, the player you're referring to, talked about there, he said, look, Coach Pearl's faith and the fact that he is so outward about his faith, he wears it on his sleeve. He said, that gave me the confidence to give Jesus all the glory for my walk. And it made me be more vocal and wanting to share my faith with others. And so he saw that and it empowered him. And look, I tell people all the time, look, we're not going to change the world. You can't change the world. I can change the world. But you know what? I can have an effect on my family, and I can have an effect on my team, and I can even have an effect maybe on my community. Like start small, and then we build and we grow. And you know what? After a while, you can make a difference in how we respect one another and obviously respect one another's faith. For me, faith and family are the cornerstone of our program. If that fits with a prospect, great. If it doesn't, he can go get the basketball at a lot of other places.
Listen, at a risk of not knowing the answer to this question, and as I'm a lawyer first, right? So usually you don't ask a question you don't know the answer to, but I want to be intellectually honest. Obviously, I cheerlead everything you do. I repost it. I tell everyone about it. I show it to my kids. I say, this is what it's like to be a proud Jew. You wear it wherever you are, right? You use your platforms. You use your opportunities to spread and to protect your people and to stand up for your people, right? So that's where I stand in case anyone doubts it. Right, but for the last several years, we've seen coaches and players at different levels, a lot in the NBA and the NFL, use their platform for just this like political agenda that I've been one of the people standing up against those things, right? So I kind of, whether it's a BLM or, we remember the LeBron James issue, and I forgot who it was. The newscaster said to him, shut up and dribble, right? Which obviously wasn't nice, right? But that's sort of the tension between people in sports getting involved in political issues or in public affairs issues. What's your take on that? Should players and coaches all be standing up for their own things, or should sports be sports? How do you look at that?
It's a great question, Gabe. Listen, this is not politics. It's about survival. This is really important point to make. This is not about politics. It's about survival. Um, you and I don't have enough time on this podcast to explain or try to understand what anti-Semitism is all about, why that doesn't all matter. We just have to recognize the fact that it does exist. And so therefore, when people want to even look at me in my social media, why are you always talking about Israel? Why are you always talking about being Jewish and being a basketball coach? And the reason is because there is a terrific misunderstanding. There is unbelievable amounts of untruthful information out there. I went to Boston College, a Jesuit school, not Boston University, right down the road, where I would be more comfortable with a lot of Jewish students, because I wanted to be the guy that lived right next door to you. And you would say, God, I had no idea he was Jewish. He's just like everybody else. I mean, he's no better, no worse. And that's the thing about anti-Semitism. Sometimes there's no connection. We don't know each other. So I wanted my Christian friends or others or my African-American players and families to get to know a Jew, no better, no worse. And then if I have an opportunity to share some of the same challenges that we've shared and being discriminated against, so on and so forth, so be it. So I just feel like really, Auburn has won 5 SEC championships in the last 8 years. Auburn has been to 2 Final Fours in the last 6 years. You cannot explain this other than Hashem. You cannot explain this other than this is God's plan for us to have this success for lots of reasons. One of the reasons I do believe in is my platform. I'm not that good a coach. I'm not. I mean, I'm just not. But I'm telling you, God's blessed me beyond what I deserve. But in return for that blessing, I think we've got to do things like call out Edon Alexander's name during the NCAA tournament, knowing that there are 22 million households out there wanting to hear how we just beat Creighton or what we're going to do in going to the Sweet 16, knowing that half of the people that listened to that don't have any idea who Edon Alexander is. They didn't even know that you mean an American is still held hostage in where? In Gaza? Well, that's wrong. That's not right. And so it's just these are things that I feel like we have to. And again, you don't have to have a bigger platform like me. But you got to start home. Like, you got to start home with your kids. You got to start at home with your own family. Who is teaching right now about what's going on in the Middle East right now? The history, the biblical history, the reality. Who's teaching that? Universities are so afraid to teach it on a college campus because they're afraid that if they teach it one way or the other, they're going to get protests, particularly if they do anything in support of the state of Israel, the Jewish people. And I'm just telling you, that is wrong. The only way we're ever going to change the narrative is if we have enough people that are speaking the truth. And then we'll let people decide for themselves.
But Coach, what's the line, right? So obviously I agree with you, right? Anti-Semitism right now, we don't have time, right? We have to be able to use all our platforms. We're at a breaking point where maybe we're way past the breaking or the tipping point on anti-Semitism in America. We have hostages still held right now. Edon Alexander was released as of the time of this recording, which was just an incredible miracle, also incredible work by President Trump, by Israel, by everybody that was involved in that, right? And there's still 4 more American bodies there, a total of 20 people that are still alive, held in tunnels in Gaza. I get that situation, but what's the line for other people, other coaches, other players to use their platforms for social issues? Should they be using it or not?
If you're informed, first of all, it's a freedom of speech. And I'm actually not against protests. I'm not. And I recognize that hate speech is allowed in this country. And so you got to walk a very fine line on that. Now, you can't break the law. You're not allowed to break the law. And let's just say, if you are over here on a student visa, you're over here in a certain way and you break the law, you got certain rules that apply to people that are guests in our country versus people that are citizens in our country, and we simply should just find the law. I'm okay with athletes and coaches and people in certain positions just take a stand if you're informed. How many times do you watch the Golden Globes or the Oscars or things like that, and people in the media are they're making it political. Look, it's their right. We don't all have to listen to it or accept it as the truth, just like you don't have to listen to me and accept it as the truth. But as Americans, it is our right to be able to express ourselves. And so, yes, overall, I don't think we should be denying anybody the right to express himself, but nobody's got the right to break the law.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, look, it's not always about First Amendment. Obviously, hate speech is protected under the First Amendment. People are confused about that. I'm someone who fights against anti-Semitism all day. You're allowed to be an anti-Semite in this country. We're also allowed to call you out for being an anti-Semite, right? That's the line that people miss. Sometimes with sports, if it's private versus public, we can have a whole discussion about that. But really, more for me, it's more about the should, right? Should they be able to speak about those things? I just remember during the pandemic when the NBA was in the bubble and the whole thing was political about BLM, and that it's a turnoff for people. If you're excited about it, then maybe it helps. But I think ratings actually went down a lot. The question is why. But I think that's part of it. When it gets too political for too many people, so it's not about whether they can, but maybe whether they should. And in a way, there's an old Supreme Court case about, they ask the Supreme Court, what's pornography? And the Supreme Court answered, pornography, you know it when you see it, versus art, right? The question is, what's pornography versus art? And I think people know what that line is. And you gave the award ceremony example. Everybody knows that's crossed way too many lines. The Oscars, the Emmys, all of those. You can't watch it unless you're woke and you're really excited about your actors being woke. You can't watch that thing anymore, and that's why the ratings go down. Listen, let's talk a little bit about basketball. I mean, you had a tremendous year, and in a way, college basketball or college sports are interesting because you build, but you have to always be building anew because you lose players. Players graduate, they go to the NBA, they go early, they transfer. There's a transfer portal to make it easy for them to put themselves out there to transfer. This year was an overwhelming success for you. I know you wanted a championship, but you got to the Final Four. I lost to the University of Florida. As a Floridian, I have my feelings about it, although I'm a University of Miami guy, so it didn't hurt too bad. But what are your goals? What's Auburn's goals for this next season?
Well, Gabe, we had a great run, and our team this past year was in many ways built the old-fashioned way. Guys that have been in our program 4 and 5 years and paid their dues and chose to fight, not flee. You've transferred in life. I've transferred in life. We've the freedom of movement, the ability to grow and go. It's an awesome thing. I just think though, this ability to transfer every year, I don't think it's great for young people. Like for example, people ask me all the time, "Have the kids changed?" I said, "No, the kids really haven't changed. They still want to be held accountable. They still want discipline. They still want you to see something in them they don't see in themselves." But I tell you who's changed, and that's the parents and the people that are all around them. So if your kid isn't batting fourth and pitching, you're putting him on another travel ball team. The only problem is he's 8. Back in the day when I was 8, if I wasn't hitting fourth, my father would tell me, quit swinging at the high ones. And if you want to pitch, throw strikes. And we've sort of lost that. We're trying to fix everything for our kids. And sometimes we think the fix is just try something else. Well, I don't think it's teaching fathers how to be good fathers and stay married and do the things that they do. You want to transfer? Great. Give a one-time transfer exception. You want to graduate, want to transfer? Great. But this transferring every single year, kids aren't graduating right now. And if you combine the transfer portal with NIL, all it is really every single year free agency. And yet you look at how we won a championship. We won a championship because we had a lot of guys that came back and have been together and really cared about each other, so on and so forth. You have to have enough talent for sure. But the game has become a little bit too transactional when it comes to recruiting and not enough ministerial and not enough, just teaching and guys wanting to get better. And, it's changed. But look, if you're going to be successful in life, you've got to change with the way the rules change and the way, you have to be able to adapt and adjust. We've done that. Believe it or not, I might have to replace everybody on my team except one player. Tahad Pettifer is still in the draft. He's actually working out today up at the combine in Chicago. And if he plays really well, he's got a chance to go in the first round. If he could go in the first round, he should stay in the draft. If he's not going to go in the first round, he'll come back to college and he'll play for me. He'll be the only player I have returning. Everybody else has graduated. Of course, I had 8 or 9 seniors.
So how do you do that, right? How is it that you're able to still build a successful team? You've done it time and time again with all those challenges. And I do want to get into NIL, which, by the way, for those who don't know, means name, image, and likeness. It's very funny because at the core, I'm a trademark lawyer, so I know a lot about name, image, and likeness from a legal perspective. But it's really impacted college sports. We'll get into that in a second. But how have you been able to continually build strong teams? Like you say, the old-fashioned way. But if you could dive into that a little bit, with all of these changes this year, you're losing almost your entire team, but the same jerseys coming on, and hopefully you'll have the same kind of success you've had for the last several years.
I don't know, Gabe. It'll be a great challenge, obviously, this year. I've had a great staff. Surround myself with really good people. We don't settle. I mean, we try not to settle for guys that can't get us to where we want to go, and sometimes less is more. In the sense that if you recruit, like we got 13 scholarships. I've only got 11 or 12 guys on scholarship. I give 1 or 2 walk-ons a scholarship every year. I can't keep 13 guys happy. Some coaches will say, hey, iron sharpens iron. We're going to bring in 13 great players. You guys figure it out. The strong survive. And if you're not playing, well, that's on you. I just don't believe in that. And so we try to make good evaluations. And we try to bring in like a couple of great players around some other really good players that are going to know their roles, rebound or defend or screen or make open shots or do things like that. But there are a couple of guys on the floor that are older, that are a little better. Let them take more chances. Again, play their game the right way, play with some efficiency, and and again, faith and family has been a foundation of our program. And I think people would say, well, I'm a sort of a player's coach. I give my guys some freedom to create and sort of be who they are. The trade-off is we can't take possessions off. We got to play harder than everybody every single night. We've been a team that's always brought it. You got to respect your opponent, but not fear any of them. And sometimes what happens is you have a little bit of success and you don't stay humble and hungry, and then you get upset, then you get beat. And you gotta play every single night like you're playing for a championship. And if you prepare that way, then you'll beat everybody on the schedule you're supposed to beat. You beat a couple people you're not supposed to beat, and in the long run, that's gonna help you have success.
Coach, before we get into NIL, I have to ask you, as an old school basketball player, I played just in high school varsity basketball. Then I got to University of Michigan. I realized that a captain of a Jewish basketball team in South Florida is a mediocre intramural player at University of Michigan. So that was my career, but still follow basketball pretty closely. And one big thing, and at the risk of sounding like an old guy at the age of 44, I feel like the 3-point shot has really, I want to say, ruined the game. And for me, it's ruined the game. I mean, the way players are playing these days, just throwing up as many threes as possible. But then you start digging into the data and the percentages that these guys are shooting at the 3-point line. It starts making sense, right? Because if you're shooting 35, 40, 45% from the 3-point line, it starts making a lot of sense because you're probably shooting just above that from 15 feet out, right? So what's your take on this? Everybody thinks they're Steph Curry now, dropping threes from all over the court. What's that doing to basketball? Is it a good thing? Is it time for me to get with the times?
Well, Gabe, 3 is worth more than 2. And, the best percentages, and of course you play by the analytics, inside threes, 3-point plays around the basket, and outside threes are your most valuable shots. The percentages, speak to that. The reason why the NBA has become nothing but a 3-point shooting contest for the most part is because the men are so big. They're so big and they're so athletic. And yet the court is still 94 feet. The basket is still 10 feet high. The lane is still the same width. And so, I don't see the game changing much when it comes to 3-ball unless they make the court a little bit bigger, or unless they raise the basket a little bit higher, open up the lane a little bit more, and create, more driving opportunities. That all said, what made the matchup with the Knicks and the Celtics the other day so compelling was nobody could cover Brunson. You had to guard him at the 3-point line, and if you guarded him at the 3-point line, he could go by you and he could still make it tough too. That's what makes him, right now, the best player in the playoffs right now. And so, yeah, you're gonna have to just get over it. You know, I understand where you're coming from, but it's still the highest percentage shot. And the way the pros shoot it, like it's almost a free throw. So inside threes and outside threes, get used to it, Gabe.
Listen, it's tough. It's tough to watch, and I catch myself all the time remembering myself in the '90s, being sort of the prime of my basketball life, and my father telling me that they don't know how to play basketball, and comparing them to the old time Celtics, and here I am doing the same thing, probably at the same age, doing the same thing he did. So it's tough. It's tough to have those realizations. Listen, NIL has been a big thing, name, image, and likeness. For those who don't know, right, basketball, without going through all the figures, but college basketball teams have been making tons of money for their schools directly and indirectly, right? Ticket sales, TV revenue, but also just driving admissions to their schools. And you see it. I remember when I was at school at University of Michigan, the athletes going around wearing college sweatpants and shirts that they got for free, and living within their means. And when they didn't, and someone came and was helping them, they'd all get in trouble because you weren't allowed to help them. So there were some Supreme Court cases that came, and then some rule changes that allowed players to go out and own their own name, image, and likeness, the short of which is NIL, which seems like a really fair thing. Let these guys make some money. They're adults. They're all at, 18 and up. Let them do that, not just let the school have it. But it has its ups and downs, like you said it. How you spoke about it a little bit, but how has NIL, the way it's been implemented, impacted the college game?
Well, if you want to use Michigan as example, there's something fundamentally wrong when there's a jersey in the Michigan bookstore that's the same number as Jalen Rose, number 5, with Rose on the back. And you could buy that shirt, Gabe, and walk around with the number 5 Michigan jersey, Jalen Rose, and Jalen Rose wouldn't get any kind of a percentage on that. That's the whole name, image, and likeness thing. Um, and how this all got started, it got started back in the day when Ed O'Bannon, number 31, a very dark-skinned African-American player, left-handed, who played for UCLA. I remember Ed growing up in high school. A few years after he got done playing, he and his buddies are just playing some Xbox game, and there's a UCLA and number 31 and a really long, dark-skinned, left-handed player. And the kid goes, "Man, Ed, that's you." He says, "You must be making a fortune off of this." He goes, Ed says, "I'm not making anything off of that." Guy said, "Well, gee, that just doesn't seem right. Let me talk to a lawyer friend of mine." And next thing it goes to the court, and it goes all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court says this whole setup of just tuition, room, board, and books and fees, these guys not being able to benefit from their own name, image, and likeness is wrong. Johnny Manziel at Texas A&M. Nobody would know who Texas A&M football was. It wasn't for Johnny Manziel. His Cam Newton at Auburn. Like when Cam Newton was worn number 1, every kid walked around with Newton number 1 Auburn. Cam should have been able to benefit from that. So they recognized something was wrong, and they began to say, okay, it should be more than tuition, room, board, books, and fees. And they were right. And the NCAA and the presidents of universities should have been smart enough to settle that case and say, Ed, you're right. We're going to start paying you guys either a stipend, or we're going to start paying you guys an annuity. The longer you stay, the more you get. Maybe even tie it into, even with football getting the most because they make the most money. However it is, the NCAA just said, no, we're not doing it. We're not changing our model. And the court said, yeah, you are. And so now what we have is we have a system that has no guidelines right now. It's totally a free market. They don't even have that in Major League Baseball, the NFL, or hockey. They've got collective bargaining. They've got certain amount of resources that each team can work with. You remember back in the day when the Yankees, won all those championships. Well, they had the best roster because the Major League Baseball didn't have a collective bargaining agreement, and only 2 or 3 good teams. That's what's happening right now in college. Look at Ohio State winning the football national championship last year. They had a $25 million NIL. It was the most, and they won. Well, I don't know that that's the way they want it set up. So listen, it's a great thing. I want my kids to own 5 subways. I don't want them working in a subway. I want them to own 5. And I think they deserve to be compensated because it is big business. We just have got to get some guidelines. Honestly, unfortunately, I think some laws need to change, allowing us to bring back some of the things about the older model, at the same time compensating the student athletes the way they deserve to be compensated. And so right now it is what it is. We're gonna have to play by the rules as they are. and then hopefully we gain some greater guidelines so that we're at least all, let's say, at the Power Four level, playing by the same rules. That's why I think you're going to see some changes in Division One, Division Two, Division Three. Um, Akron has nothing in common with the Ohio State University, and we've got to treat everybody fairly accordingly.
If you could wave a wand, what regulations would you put in place? What guidelines would you put in place for NIL?
Well, you know what? I'm not smart enough to be able to make that call.
Yeah,
What I
you are.
think the best thing would be to do is if somehow there was some separation amongst the divisions, if there was a way for the student athletes to have somebody representing them in a collective bargaining with each conference or with the NCAA, and come up with something that works for everybody. That seems to be the way that would fall within our Constitution and our laws. Gabe, you're an attorney. You should have a better idea. I'm just a basketball coach. I'm not smart enough to make those calls.
I've heard you calling for Congress to pass laws. There was a bill, I think, that was being floated around that didn't go anywhere on this. What you do know basketball really well, and I think you're much smarter than you let up. I'm confident about that. But why would we look at the government for a fix? Why can't the NCAA
Great call,
regulate,
Gabe.
regulate their own league?
Great call. It's real simple. It's real simple. The way the laws are written right now in our country, basically antitrust laws primarily. The NCAA is a complete antitrust violation. And so the reason why what's happened was, and they went to the courts. And what's happening is every student athlete or situation goes to the courts, and the courts look at it and say, "No, you guys can't do that. That's against the Constitution." If Congress somehow is able to provide the NCAA or some form of organization with some antitrust protections so that they can determine that, look, we are a separate entity. We're not a Major League Baseball. We're not just a for-profit organization. We're in the university college system. And so therefore we need a slightly different set of rules. If the laws don't change, the courts are going to continue to rule that it's going to be open season. And the open season thing is I'm a capitalist and I believe in it, but right now the model we have is unsustainable. And the biggest thing is everybody's playing by a different set of rules. Every state's playing by different rules. How can you have an NCAA national champion if every state and every university and every league is allowed to play with a different set of rules? It doesn't work that way. We got to find a way to get everybody on the same page. That's why I think Congress needs to be involved.
Well, look, with the NCAA, not just the NCAA, with colleges and universities on such terrible terms with Congress right now, with the foreign funding and indoctrination of students on college campuses and the continued implementation of banned affirmative action policies around the country, there's a lot of tension between Congress and colleges. And I think if the NCAA were to go push now, they might get the short end of that stick because they'll be wrapped in with everything else that's happening. So unless they're going to figure out a way to self-regulate, I don't think Congress is going to be the answer. That's kind of the space I work in. If there would be something passed this session, that would be reasonable for college athletes, I'd be blown away.
No, look, I think people should be paid what they're worth, but I think that we're coming close to that line for sure. We've crossed that line in many ways. I'm not the one to determine what that line is, but I just think that it can't be unlimited. It's not unlimited in any other professional sport. So therefore, we've got to find a way to get some guidelines on this. And then as far as Congress not being able to solve the problem, when Republicans and Democrats start recognizing they're Americans first and Republicans or Democrats second, then maybe Congress can get something done. But Congress can't get anything done because they can't get along and do what's best for our country.
Yeah, which is why their approval rating sits under 20% for years, right? Your statement that they should be Americans first and partisans second, I think over 95% of Americans agreed with. Somehow our elected officials as a whole don't reflect that, which is a big problem in our country. Listen, with this year, I just want to dive into a couple of changes that you have this year. You picked up a big transfer from UCF, Keyshawn Hall. What does he mean to your team, and what are I think you have another couple of transfers coming in. What do they mean for your team for this next season?
Well, Keyshawn's a bucket getter, and he's a tough cover. He's an old school guy, and he really knows how to play. And we're going to with Keyshawn, I think getting him to be effective on both ends of the floor. He's always been better offensively than he is defensively. He wants to be better in that area. He knows he needs to be in order to make that next step and play it at the higher level. We've got to again, the whole roster is rebuilt. Keyshawn Murphy is transferring in from Mississippi State. He's from Alabama. I've watched him for years. Mississippi State done a great job with that kid, getting him better, and he's going to be an awfully tough cover. Gosh, you know what? I can go through the whole roster, and just tell you that we're just going to be a different team, and but I think that we're still going to be a team that's going to play hard, play together. But I know less about this next year's team, Gabe, than any team I've ever coached. But I think we've done a good job recruiting the right people that want to work hard, embrace the culture, help each other get better. Don't make the other four guys better on the floor. Are we better on the floor because you're on the floor defensively, making those other four guys better? And if we can do that on both ends of the floor, I think we'll be competitive again. It looks like in our league of last year, there were 16 teams in the SEC. 14 of them made the NCAA tournament. It was the best league in the history of college basketball. We did really well in the tournament. Obviously, Florida and Todd Golding winning a national championship, and us get two teams getting to the Final Four. It just means more in the SEC. It just and for us to have won the regular season championship this year, given all that, we made some really special history.
By the way, the SEC is winning on a lot of things. It's when you're talking about conferences of colleges and universities that are mostly not infected by the garbage we're seeing in colleges and universities all over the rest of the country. The SEC is a shining star mostly. Of course, there may be some exceptions there, but you look at that conference, that area of the country, and just so much good happening there. Just one last question about the NBA draft. I think you have two players going up to the draft, right? It's Junie Broome, and I'm saying his name wrong. I think Junai Broome.
Yeah, we've got Janai Broome that will get drafted. He was one of the candidates for Player of the Year this year. His 3-year career at Auburn was just incredible. Todd Pettifer is in the draft right now, but he's just a freshman, and he's either going to stay in if he can go first round, or he'll come back to school. But we've got a few other seniors: Dylan Cardwell, Miles Kelly, Denver Jones. Those three guys also. Chaney Johnson, those guys will all have an opportunity. I don't know that any of those other guys get drafted, but I bet you almost all of them are in the summer league in Vegas this year, and so we've got some really good players in the NBA right now, and actually we got 4 guys from the Auburn basketball team playing professionally in Israel. In fact, the best player in the country right now is Jared Harper, who plays for Jerusalem Hapoel. And they're in the playoffs right now. Austin Wiley is a center on that team. Bryce Brown, one of the all-time greatest scorers in the history of the SEC, is playing in Israel, and he's the leading scorer in professional league. And Lior Berman is playing for Ashkelon. So we've got 4 guys over there representing.
Unbelievable. I saw a whole interview you did about them and about how the impact of the trips when you take these guys over to Israel have had in the way they look at the things. And I follow some of those guys online, and seeing them just represent the truth. They're not political guys. They just want to say, hey, here's what life is like here. And it's nothing like what they're telling you. I just think that's spectacular. On the NBA thing, what's interesting to me is seeing these guys that can go in, they can try out, and then they can come back. They can reserve eligibility on their team like you have with you. Is that process broken? Is there something that needs to be fixed there, or you think the balance is right between college athletics and the NBA?
No, I think it's a good process. I do. I think that the NBA guys have been really good in communicating what's real and what's not real. The fact that the kids can go back to college game is a good thing. Back in the day, there was a time you put your name in for the draft and you got an agent, you did a few other things, you're done, you lost your eligibility. And a lot of kids would try to go to the NBA way too soon, chase the money before they were ready. And then they wound up with nothing, or having to go overseas. And that's why back in the day, the G League was much bigger. And so, no, I think there's a really nice, healthy balance between guys that want to try their hand at the league and still be able to go back to school if they don't feel like they're going to get drafted in the right spot.
All right, final 2 questions. Last year there was a lot about this past season. There was a lot of talk about the coaches, even in the Wall Street Journal, which is what I read in the mornings. There was always a story about the coaches. Of course, 3 of the 4 coaches, by the way, just a side note, in the Final Four were Jewish, which was interesting and kind of a fun fact for the Jewish community. But sort of, who is the toughest coach to go up against, and who are you looking to go up against this year to try to get a win against?
Well, Rick Pitino was the toughest coach I've ever gone up against. I've only played him a couple times. What made him great was he was better than I was in every aspect of the game, but he had a great feel for what I wanted to do and how I wanted to play, and he was able to take that away from me. That's not to say, I mean, look, I've gone up against so many great coaches. You name one of them, I got up against them. Pretty much. I'm 65 years old. I've been around a long time. Billy Donovan was a guy that I really enjoyed coaching against when he was at Florida because they had won championships at Florida, and he just did it the right way, and was a great ambassador for our game. But there are just so many really great guardians of the game and in our profession. It is a very, very honorable profession, and I'm just telling you, the leaders of most of these programs are at the top of their game. Their character, their work ethic. Um, it's a very competitive industry, but it's filled with great, great, great men, great teachers, great fathers, great role models, and that doesn't get talked about nearly enough.
So we're in the middle of the NBA playoffs. This is a risky question to ask because this is getting pre-recorded. It'll come out in early next week. Your answer may be a dud, but we're going to go for it. Who are you rooting for in the playoffs? Who do you want to see take the win?
Well, I'm a Boston Celtics guy because I grew up in Boston, and as we sit right now, the Knicks are ready to eliminate them or getting close to it. So we don't know what's going to happen, but it doesn't look good for my Celtics. I've got two players, Chumo Kiki and Isaac Okoro, playing for the Cleveland Cavaliers. So I'm going to go ahead and continue to support the Cavs because I got a couple of players there. And Gabe, listen, thank you for what you do. Just thank you for the truth. And I think that's something that unfortunately has gotten lost a little bit in our media. The media has become so partisan and so political and so divided that people have got to take everything that the media says with a grain of salt. I read a lot, and so often I've got to be able to read through the lines because there's got to be difference between news and the editorial page, which there used to be. Now everything is editorialized, and so fact and fiction are hard to come by because there's so much out there. And I think you do a great job of staying with the truth. Can I do one shameless plug?
Do it
for a second. I just would like to just there are two organizations that I'm involved with. I just going to mention them briefly. One is USIEA, that's United States Israel Educational Association. It's been around since 2011. I'm blessed right now to be the chairman of the board. What the organization has done, they basically are working in three lanes: the lanes of the Abraham Accords and promoting things, everything Abraham Accords, and there's some exciting things coming down the line right now with that. They're also very involved in the sovereignty of Judea and Samaria as the best way for all of the people in Judea and Samaria to live in peace and prosperity is with Israel having sovereignty and the Arabs that are living there having local autonomy. And then the third lane is Israel's defense and technology. All those three things combined, what we do is we educate congressional leaders as to the truth. We take them to Israel and we take them to Judea and Samaria. We take them to some of the holy sites. We teach them the Abrahamic covenant, and we teach them their responsibility of understanding the situation and also standing with Israel as she's just constantly been attacked to survive over the last 80 years.
Before you go to the next organization, I just want to chime in on one thing that's important. So many times when there's a sponsor, and this is not a sponsor, we have our sponsor, Christians United for Israel. We did that earlier. But sometimes when there's sponsors, you wonder whether the host agrees with what the sponsors are saying, or when a guest brings up an organization. So I just want to be crystal clear. Those three lanes, word for word, what the coach said, I agree with and I support wholeheartedly, including Judea and Samaria and the future for that, what the world calls the West Bank. We've spoken about it a lot on the podcast. We can do more about it, but I just wanted to be crystal clear on that. So, Coach, first of all, bravo for doing that. My hat's off to you for that, and I want to make sure the listening audience knows that I support all those initiatives wholeheartedly.
Wow, that's great, Gabe. Thank you. And I know that we're in this work together, and we can't educate everybody. I think that's one of the best ways to a long-term peace is through education and through peace and prosperity and through economic coexistence. Every country should do what's in their best interests. And it's in the best interest of the countries in the Middle East to have Israel as an ally. And it's in their best interest to also recognize who the terrorists are and understand that we have two choices. The first thing, we must protect ourselves from those that want to kill us, and that want to say over and over again they want to kill us. We simply must protect ourselves from them. And the second thing we got to do is we got to live an exemplary life. Israel's got to live by a different standard. Jews, we have to live by and should live by a different standard. We're God's chosen people. And so we need to be kinder. We need to be more generous. We need to be more loving. We need to be more patient. We need to be the best versions of what we possibly can be. And then, you know what? Maybe just maybe the ones that are undecided will recognize that our faith and who we are and how we're commanded to live this life is worthy of their recognition that we have a right to exist. And that's something that we're obviously looking to fight for. The other organization I'm involved with, I'm on the board with Athletes for Israel. Daniel Posner, our leader, has done an amazing job right now. Gabe, right now, he has got the Jewish quarterback from BYU, along with 5 or 6 of his other team captains in Israel right now, visiting. All he's got to do is take them, let them see the land, let them meet the people, let them see the diversity, let them see the culture, let them see the color. You don't have to say a word. Let them see it for themselves. And they'll go there and they'll see how much the people are just so grateful to be back in God's holy land, and love the land, love the nation, and aren't going anywhere. They'll come back with that message. And my basketball team went to Israel about 3 years ago. Athletes helped. We sent Arizona and Kansas State to Israel and Abu Dhabi in an Abraham Accords type trip a couple of years ago. Daniel Posner and Athletes for Israel made that happen. And so sometimes in sports, we need to take the leadership role and demonstrate to the world that through sports and through that connectivity, we can do this. We can make this happen. And so I'm excited, very, very excited about the future of what Athletes for Israel is doing as well. Those are the two places that I spend a great deal of my time. And I'm so grateful, Gabe, that you gave me an opportunity to share that with you.
Of course, Coach Bruce Pearl, listen, I have nothing but respect for you, for who you are, for how you prioritize your family, you bring them with you on the road, take them to games. They're sitting right behind you in all these in all the games. People see who you are, a man of faith, a man of family, a man who believes in something, and a hell of a basketball coach, and I'm proud to say a friend. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Right back at you. God bless America, and I'm Yisrael Chai.
Amen. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Make sure to like, follow, subscribe, do all the great things you do to support podcasts, and we'll see you next time.